Well, he should know them because I believe I referred to them in the select committee. So I hope that he was listening.
Here we're going to prove that our shameless Kemi Badenoch is a proven liar, where during her speech in the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership Bill on the 29th of January this year in the House of Commons, the chair of the Business and Trade Committee, Byrne, asked our Minister for Business and Trade, Kemi Badenoch, this question.
Make an intervention before she perhaps moves off cars to Canada, which is, of course, £745 million worth of exports, and which currently benefits from tariff-free trade because of the extended accumulation of origin rules. That tariff break basically ends at the end of March. At the moment, because the talks are broken down, we face a situation where our car exports are about to be hit by tariffs. Can the Secretary of State just tell the House a little bit more about how she plans to avoid a tariff wall hitting UK car exports at the end of March?
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his question. It's a good opportunity for me to state explicitly talks have not broken down. There are multiple discussions that we are having with Canada on cheese, where we have not come to an agreement. However, the quotas that we have in CPTPP with Canada, 16.5 kilotons, are more than what we are selling to Canada at the moment, 2 kilotons. So we're not particularly concerned about that, although it is disappointing. We have a rules of origin discussion that is ongoing, and we have an FTA discussion, which I have paused for reasons which he will know. However, he should know them because I believe I referred to them in the select committee. So I hope that he was listening. But the point I'm making to the chair of the select committee, that trade is very dynamic. There are some issues which we are negotiating and discussing with our partners, which we have differences of opinion, and there are others which are going swimmingly. This is not a reason for us to cast aspersions on our trade relationships with those countries.
Well, luckily for our Minister for Business and Trade, not only was Byrne listening to you, so was a certain Graham Lanktree as well. And I'll let James O'Brien explain who he is.
Graham Lanktree is the UK trade reporter at Politico Europe, and I think perhaps uniquely in the British media, he had the wizard wheeze of deciding to ask the Canadians. Graham, what did they say?
Thanks, James. Well, I am Canadian, so I still maintain ties to Canada. Just one point: it's not that the UK-Canada trade deal, the current one, will dissolve on April 1st. It's just specifically the rules of origin issue. The deal will stay in place until there's a new one. But this rules of origin provision, which allows British manufacturers to use EU parts in their products
without paying tariffs.
Without paying tariff, precisely. That the UK automotive industry's supply chains are, embedded into the EU. So having these rules dissolve will be a big hit for British manufacturers. And cars are in the top 5 exports that Britain sends over to Canada.
Really? About £745 million a year.
Precisely.
And that's in genuine jeopardy, you would say?
Well, what could happen is that those vehicles will be taxed. And so manufacturers might not want to send as many. And those tariffs really impact consumers in Canada who may not, because those costs will be passed along to them, they may not want to choose a British vehicle because it's suddenly, several percent more expensive.
So you went to Global Affairs Canada, who are the relevant body for these issues, and you essentially asked them whether or not they recognise the version of events that Kemi Badenoch had shared with the House of Commons on Monday.
I did, and they said that the idea that there are ongoing rules of origin discussions is inaccurate. They also said that the idea that there's multiple discussions with Canada on cheese that are potentially ongoing, Kemi Badenoch's words are kind of vague, exactly what she means. But there's no discussions on cheese. All of these things are tied into the negotiations for a new trade deal that Badenoch walked away from last Thursday.
As an expert in these matters yourself, was this a sort of, is she trying to play hardball, do you think? Because we had during the last, I mean, at every stage of negotiations, Conservative politicians, pro-Brexit Conservative politicians have given the impression that they believe that they have enormous heft and leverage at negotiation tables, and the reality often turns out to be otherwise. Do you think we're seeing another episode of that? Leaving aside for the moment the question that she effectively stands accused of misleading Parliament, because that's become almost par for the course for this government. But on that issue of heft and tactics, what's your reading of the situation?
I mean, if this is a negotiating strategy to get the Canadians to budge, they're not going to budge at all. As one Canadian official told me, this strategy, it will only produce a hit to UK businesses. Canada really wants Kemi Badenoch to get back to the negotiating table. It's up to the UK whether or not they do that. But talks did reach a stalemate last autumn, and that was over Canada's continuing pressure to try and get the UK to allow hormone-treated beef, that same issue with the United States trade deal, into the British market, because Canada's beef market is tied to the US, and they have very, very similar standards.
And that's a red line, actually, for Rishi Sunak, isn't it? Despite the fact that Jacob Rees-Mogg told me some years ago he's an enormous fan of hormone-treated beef, at least for other people to eat. That is a Rishi Sunak red line, which perhaps people don't fully appreciate.
It is, yeah. But I mean, we obtained some leaked memo that was sent internally by one of the most senior trade negotiators that was produced last June, that Rishi Sunak had actually directed Kemi Badenoch and them to slow down trade negotiations with Canada and Mexico so that they could focus on getting a deal with India.
Extraordinary stuff. Where would you put your money come April the 1st? Will this have been ironed out, or do you think we're going to see a cliff edge of sorts?
I think it's really up to Kemi Badenoch and whether or not she gets back to the table.
And why wouldn't she? Because she won't get enough in return to even sell it to readers of the Daily Express as a positive. Potentially.
She's between a rock and a hard place, really. And I mean, if you look at it, this is what trade negotiations are all about, and they can be very difficult and very acrimonious between two different countries. Canada, people like to think that we're all nice and quite friendly.
Do they?
We like to think that we are. But when it comes to trade negotiations, beef and dairy are very important to the Canadian government, because Alberta and Quebec are essential provinces which produce beef and dairy, are essential provinces to winning the next Canadian election, which is going to happen in 2025.
Graham Lanktree, as always, the UK trade correspondent at Politico. Thank you for your time and your scoops. The man's a scoop machine. I should add that perhaps speaking to the acrimony that Graham referenced there, a spokesperson for Kemi Badenoch's department, the Department for Business and Trade, said, we disagree with the assessment. So the Canadians have said, no, there is no talks. Kemi Badenoch says, yes, there are. And her department says, yes, no, we disagree with the people on the other side of the negotiating table who say they aren't having any talks with us at the moment. And there you go, in another slightly nutty nutshell. That is Brexit Britain.
Exactly, James. And the day before, Andrew Marr interviewed the clown that is David Davis, who, when asked how well Brexit is going, he gave Brexit 8 out of 10. Mentally. What do you guys think? Did Kemi Badenoch knowingly mislead Parliament? Is she totally out of her depth when it comes to international trade? Let me know down below. Have a wonderful weekend and take care, my friends.